Hello everyone, Scott here with HFX Motorsports. Another question I've been getting a lot online lately is about chain, sprocket, and chain maintenance. It's great that there's all kinds of new people getting into motorcycling. One thing we have seen through the shop is that people, because our cars these days are so reliable and need so little maintenance, and they go for such long periods of time before they need any work done, some people, when they buy bikes, they kind of expect the same performance or long maintenance schedule off of a motorcycle as they do our new cars. So a lot of the new motorcycles are very, very reliable. You don't have to worry about a lot of things, but there are more things that you have to kind of pay attention to keep your bike good and to keep the maintenance good on it. And one thing is chains. So a chain comes in a few different formats, like one without O-rings, which are little rubber rings that go between the chain to help keep grease in and dirt and water out. On most street bikes, that's 99% of them. That's what you're going to find. It's important to keep the chain well lubed, and kind of rule of thumb that I've always gone by is every second tank of fuel, I would give it a little spray. I'll wipe it down to wipe all the old gunk off of there, and then give it another little spray. And I usually do this at the end of my ride, because then the chain is warm, and when it cools, it's gonna suck all that lubrication into the chain. If you try to grease or put chain wax on a cold chain, a lot of it just won't sink in, and some of it will fling. So I'm gonna take the camera from Jeremy. So we just happen to have one bike on the stand that Jeremy's putting a new set of plastics on. But this is a very typical setup for most sport bike chains. They're very easy to adjust, and it's important to keep your chain adjusted. When it's new, a chain will naturally stretch when you're just using the bike and the power. It'll stretch a little bit, so that's the point where you're probably going to want to keep an eye on it the most. And a too loose chain, if it's loose enough, it can actually get on top of the sprocket and spin. It would have to be incredibly loose, but if it's too loose, it'll do that. Another thing a loose chain will do is you'll have a lot of slop in the throttle. So you'll go to apply throttle, and that looseness, you'll feel that disconnect from your throttle to the rear wheel as the front sprocket takes up that slop. On the flip side, if a chain is too tight, it will actually it'll bind up your suspension. So what'll happen as your wheel tries to travel up into that suspension, the chain will actually inhibit that, and all that tension, instead of being on your spring and on your shock, will actually be taken up by the chain, and it throws the handling off of the motorcycle completely. So, Jeremy, what do you think? Like, when you do a chain adjust and lube, are you finding that most of them, do they always need something, or are you finding a lot of them that are good?
I find it's definitely a very neglected practice. A lot of them come in, they're dirty, they don't have any lube on them, they're very loose. Very rarely you'll see one that's too tight, because people are neglecting them more often than not, and
right.
Of course they get looser over time.
Right.
And a lot of people that I've talked to, they don't even realize that a chain is something that you clean. So
right.
That's a good thing to point out to people.
Because to add to that point, if you don't take the old grease off the chain, there's no way for the new grease to get onto the chain. You're basically you're just adding new grease on top of old dirty grease.
That's right. Yeah.
So what are some techniques that people can use to get the old grease off?
Well, there's two different ones. There's one, a brush called a grunge brush. Yeah. That's a nice little brush.
Do you have that right here?
I do, yeah. This is what's known as a grunge brush here. So
you can see that one's been well used.
Yes.
It gets a lot of miles in this shop.
And nice thing about this one is you can actually just, it's best to do it around the rear sprocket, I find. It just makes it easier to control without the chain being wobbly down below.
Right.
So best to do it around the sprocket. Get your bike up in the air with some sort of a lift of some kind, maybe even a snapjack.
And we do sell these nice lifts here at the shop, and very convenient if you've got a bike with a chain. it's nicer to even check the oil like that, to adjust the chain, to clean the bike.
Keeps it nice and stable. Your other option for a brush comes in our chain clean canisters, which is fantastic. So if you don't want to spring the extra dollars for a grunge brush, this is the Tirox Chain Clean. It's a kerosene-based product.
Yeah, because that's basically, it's kerosene in a can
Right.
with probably some different additives.
Exactly.
But it just makes it, they package it in a spray can, makes it super easy to use, correct?
Absolutely, yep. And it comes with a neat little brush here, so it comes kind
Right.
of compressed in the can. You open it up, you spin it onto your chain. This one here you would use more down on the bottom of the chain. You soak it nice with the chain clean, rub it back and forth, and it'll really get all that gunk off.
Now I'm going to ask an obvious question.
Yeah.
Should the bike be running and you do this in gear, or should you do this in
Absolutely
neutral?
not.
Okay.
Yes, you want it in neutral.
So
you
what
want the
happens
bike
sometimes
off.
when the bike's running and you're trying to do that? Do you
Yes,
possibly lose fingers?
That's right. You may run over. God, anything can happen. Something hits that shifter while that bike's sitting in neutral, and yeah, you may have 8 digits instead of 10. So
Right.
we don't want that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a great little kit, and people seem to use
And
it
it really,
quite a lot.
I've seen that work before, and I've used
It's
it.
excellent.
It peels off. It takes an old chain that looks like it's ready to be replaced and
That's
makes it
right.
look like brand new, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I get shocked reviews from everybody that I do. It'll really bring the chain right back to what it looks like new. So it's
And then,
fantastic.
so you wipe off all the gunk, and then
Yep.
it's good to apply a good high quality chain lube or chain
That's right.
wax,
What I like to do actually is wipe off all the gunk and then use soap and dish detergent to get this stuff off of the chain.
Right.
Dry it really nice. Compressed air works best. Get all the soap, the water, and whatever remnants of this is left in there. Then do a nice coat of whatever chain lube you choose.
Yeah,
So
and try to do that when the chain is warm.
that's right. Always
after
better.
the fact,
Yep,
yeah.
Always better.
There's a few little cheats too that I used to do when I was racing, because a lot of times you're changing wheels and you're by yourself, and sometimes you're changing wheels between rounds. So what I used to do to make sure, so when you're adjusting your chain in your manual, it'll tell you, and a lot of manuals are online now. You'll get accustomed to a feel though. After you do it enough, you'll know whether it's too tight or too loose. And when it's adjusted properly, you'll know, because you'll have the instant connection between the throttle and the rear wheel. You won't feel that slop if it's too loose, and your chain won't be as noisy either, because it's not moving and growing as you're traveling down the road.
Yep.
So a trick that I used to use is, you do have your, if Jeremy wants to come in,
Sure.
you do have like your adjuster nuts. So basically that's your lock nut. This is your adjuster nut, or I should say, yeah, your lock nut, your adjuster bolt, your axle. So you're going to want to loosen your axle. You're going to want to loosen your lock nut, and then you use your adjuster bolts to basically move that rear wheel in and out, and obviously tighten it or loosen it. So what can be frustrating though is that you'll lock this down, lock your adjuster nut down. When you go to tighten the axle, it wants to spin the rear wheel away, and it will tighten the chain up. So a trick that I have used, and I don't see a wrench right here, but this will, for demonstration purposes, is that you put a wrench in and you just spin it back. You don't have to put a ton of tension on, but you just spin it back to lock that chain in exactly the tension you want. Then you tighten up your axle bolt, and then when you roll it ahead, you'll still have the exact amount of play. Like that one, if I had to guess,
Definitely loose.
it's loose. Like
Yeah.
if we didn't put a measuring on that, but I just know, like when I used to run the race bike, the wheel used to basically go the full travel. So on the race bike, I would probably leave it like that because it was so much travel, and I ran a looser chain because that was just the way I liked it.
Sure.
But on this, I would tighten that up just slightly. And as you can see, this one's not bad, but it could use a good clean and a good lube too.
We'll be recommending that for sure. And just a side note, on top of our other notes that we've already given you, but any bike is going to have some sort of drive chain free play notice here on usually on the chain guard or on the swing arm. Also down here is your tire information if you're ever wondering what the manufacturer recommends for your tires. one other thing is when you're adjusting your chain down here, you've got your adjustment on this side as well as the other side. So whatever you're doing to one side, you want to do to the other side, because that's going to control your alignment of your rear wheel.
Yeah. So what I used to do as a trick, I used to either count the threads on the adjuster nut. Count the threads on the adjuster nut. Some people will measure from the axle to like a fixed point on the motorcycle. Or another thing that I was shown at the racetrack as well, that if you come back here, and it's probably going to be a little hard to see, but if you pull the tension out of the bottom of your chain and look up the rear sprocket, up your chain, use it like a gun sight, and you'll tell if that rear sprocket is offset, even the slightest little bit, you'll see it as you look up there. So that's a trick that I always used to use. So I'm pressing down here to take all the tension out of that chain, and then you want to look up there, and that should be straight as a pin, because you don't want your rear sprocket to be out of line with your front sprocket, because then your chain is going to be running off and trying to straighten out. So.
Which is also your rear and front tires would be the same.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's going to wear the chain out more, and it's going to wear your tire out more.
Yep.
So, and it's just, if you keep your chain adjusted and lubed, it'll last so much longer. We've seen customers purchase a new chain and sprockets from us, and unfortunately never greased it and never adjusted it, and literally wore it out in a season of riding. And then they're a little upset that it's like, oh, my brand new chain shouldn't be like that. But it does require maintenance. You got to keep them adjusted, and you got to keep them lubed, and there's no point in putting good new lube on top of old dirty lube. So any questions anybody has for me, reach out to us, and I'll be happy to answer, and I'll keep the maintenance videos coming. Thanks.